The following BLTV program is brought to you by O'Flaherty Law. Please enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of the OnPurpose Growth podcast. I appreciate everybody watching and listening. And today's going to be really interesting. I know I'm going to get something out of this, but today I've got Sophie Chiche. She's the CEO and founder of BeCurrent, and she's a productivity expert. And what we're going to be talking about is why productivity is about finding your purpose and not about doing more stuff. And I'm excited about this. I'm hoping I'm going to get a transformation, some type of transformation on here. But Sophie, thanks for being on. And why don't you give people a little bit more deeper background on you, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. It's one of my favorite topics, obviously, since I spend my life with it. So my company is called BeCurrent, and it is the result of having been an entrepreneur, still kind of being an entrepreneur, and starting companies and having good ideas and wanting to do a lot with my life and feeling like sometimes the how to do it and in what order and what are the priorities. And I found myself, it's not an easy thing to kind of decide what I do first. And so BeCurrent was born out of this desire to be very active in the world, but not from a place that was very rigid. And so it's a combination of, like, I call it productivity with a soul. I like this idea that it's like I really add my purpose to what I do, because a lot of people don't realize that what they do adds up to their lives. You know, like they don't see it as like, if I spend my day doing things I don't like doing, I'm probably not going to like the result of all that, right? And so to really be very mindful about what gets on my schedule. That's a very important piece for me in the work that I do is really training people to have boundaries, you know, to not just let anything go in just because someone asked to, or to be more deliberate about what gets on the schedule. So that's kind of that's the juice for me. That's where it's at.
Yeah, that's so interesting because so many times when I think about productivity, and I'll speak for people watching or listening, I think that's what we think about. So where does that, how do we start changing our thinking or orienting to this differently?
You know, I would say the very first thing is we need to assess what's there. You know, when you want to do, I don't know, spring cleaning in your house, you don't sit here and think, oh, where should I start? And, you know, you go to one room and you start putting things out of the closets and out of the cabinets and out of the drawers, and you start looking at what's actually there. And so part of the process when people work with me is to really have the courage and the honesty to kind of look at, we do, like, literally we empty what's in our head. That's the first step. Like, what is actually there? Because a lot of people, they let things take residence inside of themselves, and they're not super deliberate in letting them in. It would be like you and I walk down the street and there's, I don't know, some couch sitting there where people sleep on in the night or whatever. And you would say, I'm going to bring it in my house. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't just grab something from the street and bring it in. Well, we do that with our thoughts. That is one of the things, and with our ideas and with so someone sends us an email and there we are, just like starting to like respond to this thing that may or may not be aligned for us to be spending time with. And so the first step is assess what's already there so we can have and it is a sobering, for a lot of people, it's a sobering exercise, because as long as it's in the mush of their heads, you know, it doesn't really, they think it doesn't affect them. I think it affects us enormously when we don't have a clear, you know, head. And so the first step is to assess. Once we've assessed, similar to when you do spring cleaning, you eliminate what you don't need, or what's broken, or what someone else needs more than you, or something that needs to be fixed, you take it away to fix it, right? So similarly, when you start this process of taking out everything from your internal pantry, let's call it, you start sorting it out. Do I need this? Do I need that? Do I want to do this? Should someone else do that? Like a lot of founders and CEOs, particularly of like startups, everyone does everything. And they don't use anyone to help them or delegate, maybe because at first, you know, there's a question around money and how it's spent. But if I do something that someone else could do for $15 an hour, $20 an hour, I'm actually wasting money by not, because if I was focused on something else like growing the business, I would be making more money. So at the end of the day, you know, sometimes delegating. So there's what do I delegate? There's what do I not get involved with at all? Like some of the stuff when I work with people, they realize like, why did I say yes to that? So part of the work is to learn to say no in a kind way, but be kind of like, no, I don't want to come to IKEA this weekend with you because I'm writing a book. I'm busy. It's like to have this kindness and sweetness about it, but to be very clear, like I have a big life, I have things to do, and I could choose to go to IKEA with you. There's nothing wrong with doing it and being of service to your friends. But if you do that more than the stuff that's really, really important to you, at some point, there's a question there to like, why are you not involved with your own purpose a little bit, right? So one, we assess, two, we sort, and then we reorganize. So there, I want to ask you a question, Brian, since you're like engaged in your life. Like, I'm curious, like, where do you lose track of where would you say your productivity is not as juicy, alive, and tight as you'd like it to be? Like, what's your behavior?
Yeah, I think it's something that you described is, I've learned to delegate to my assistant. And I think there's probably more that I can delegate. And there's some hesitation there. I'm not sure what it is, right? It's, I don't know if it's like this feeling that I'm asking too much, or the opposite, I'm going to give up too much, right? And, or maybe holding on to it too much. Does that make sense?
Yes, and holding on. So why do we hold on to something in general? Like, what would be your response to, like, why does someone hold on to something they may not need or may not have to be doing themselves?
Oh man, a couple things come up. One would be there's one thing would be, well, I can do it better than somebody else. Another thing is, what else would I do with that time?
Yes.
Right.
That's really honest for you to say, because it is like some people, because they're not so in touch with their purpose. Like, if I had time, I'm writing a book. If I had time, I would be sitting there, write my book more, because that's something that I know is really important to my expression and my freedom and my, desire to like contribute something. So if I didn't have that, let's say, then there would be this like space, right? Which is one of the scariest things for humans for some reason. Like, we think that having a pause, or that's why we have a culture that's so like, do more, because people are not used to feeling the space inside themselves, inside their house, inside their thoughts, inside their feelings. Like, a lot of people have been told, don't be sad, don't be upset, or whatever. So then we grow up being these very sophisticated adults, and we cannot feel sadness. We don't know how to feel sadness. We don't know how to feel lonely. We don't know how to feel scared. And it's like, what human lives in this planet doesn't have some of those feelings? And so what happens when you start doing the work around productivity, if you do it well, you start tapping into this deeper side of yourself. Like, you immediately so honestly said, it's like, what would I be if I'm not doing something? That's a really good question, isn't it? Like, what would you be? Like, a baby who doesn't do much is the most essential thing. It's like the competence is not what we need. We need them to be. And somehow we've lost that touch with who am I and what do I want to do? And what does that look like when I do what actually I want to do? And people have lost touch. Like, they do what they have to do. We all somewhat like automatically, we like walk around like doing the thing and the job and they pay the rent. And it's like we all doing what we have to do. But I'm kind of like revolutionizing to like, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? And when you ask someone, what do you actually want to do? Like, what would you do if you have time? Lots of people are left a little bit with like, I don't know. And that's a really good start, right? That's a really good start. It's like, what do I want to do? What do I want to contribute? I was writing part of the book this morning, and I was thinking about this visit I did with my uncle, who was in a mental hospital when I was young. And I went to visit him. He was there for most of his life, but I went to visit him once and he wasn't ready. And I was walking around a very beautiful park, and I sat on this bench, and there's this old guy, and I'm like, let's chat while I'm waiting. And we started chatting, and this guy had a broken heart. Like, you could tell, like, his life was not what he had wanted. And he ended up in this place was clearly not, when you're well. And he started sharing with me that he didn't like his job. He didn't have a good relationship with his kids. He didn't really love his wife, who had died recently. And he realized how much he didn't really care to be with her for all these years. And I sat there, I was maybe early 20s. And I remember it hit me so hard. It was like, it was that vision of like, I don't want to be on a bench in 90 years, 80 years, whatever, and be sitting with this young person and tell them, you know what, I missed the mark. I missed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But you don't decide when you're 90. That's not when you decide that stuff, right?
No, not at all.
Now. Like we need to decide today, like what is something I can do? Because sometimes you cannot do the big thing you want to do, but you could do a little bit, you could do a little something.
Mm-hmm.
Like this guy I was coaching a few years ago, and he wanted to like sail around the world on a boat. And so my first question was like, well, have you been on boats? Like, do you know how to sail boats? He was like, no, I've never sailed boats. I was like, okay, well, that's great. And then we broke it down to like, he went to the library, borrowed some books or rented some books about sailing. He met with a friend of his that has a boat and asked him if he can like volunteer to clean the boat some weekend and he could take him out on a little something.
Mm-hmm.
3 years later, the guy is sailing around the world. 3 years later. Because he kept like, what is the very next thing I can do? What is the very next thing I can do? Because you don't have the money to take a year off and go around the thing. That's fine. But you could go to the library and read a book about it. You can start putting energy, right? It's like putting energy forward. So with what you were saying, like, what could you put energy towards that would be something that's really exciting to you, that if you had more time, you could do it? Because then when comes an action at you that maybe your assistant could do, then maybe you kind of look at it a little differently, because often a lot of people can do better what we think we can do the best.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like my assistant, sometimes I'll literally be like, I'm proud to give it to her because I know like she's going to thrive doing something that for me is going to be like, scratch my head for an hour. And she's really good at that detail stuff. And it's like she thrives on it. And it's a lovely partnership that she loves to do the kind of detail level stuff that I don't do. So, how do we identify those places where, one, what is the bigger thing I want to do? Because without that, you're going to say yes to stuff. Like you don't have your own yes. You don't have your own big thing you want to do, right?
I love that. Yeah. I would say I'm not clear on it. And that is part of, for me personally, I'm fully clear on it. Therefore, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
There's options.
So what do you know? What can we find right now in the next 3 minutes? Like, what can we find that when you do it, like you think to yourself, I could do this without getting paid? Like, what is it that you do that's like that?
For me, it's expressing my ideas and thoughts around people being authentically themselves in sales and how to create a way of being around that. Like anytime you start journaling that message, which journaling or documenting that message, I feel that I'm creating something, and it actually gives me a good feeling because I'm expressing something that's stuck inside. Here's the catch. I don't schedule time to do that. I just do it randomly.
Exactly. So what's interesting is it's not like if you were to schedule it, you'd sit there and be like, ugh, I really don't want to do it. No. Right? You probably, so the first question wouldn't be scheduled time for me. It would be, what is the very first thing, small as it is, I don't care, 5 minutes, that you could do that would direct your boat, in this case, like your life, in a direction that gets you to do more of that? Like, what is one very simple thing you could do that would move it in that direction?
I think it's outlining kind of the framework of my thoughts around this, right? Like if I had to teach somebody to just show up like this and everything, it's outline that so then I can expand on each of the thought areas.
Do you know what's crazy for me? It's like every time I ask someone that, I find that the very thing they're not doing, because for you to express authentically, if you were to express authentically, you would do that. And that's what you say you want to teach others, right? So if you were teaching someone to be authentic right now and to be like, to move in the direction of their own purpose, which someone, of course, could be sales, like, what would you do? What would you teach someone that was like, I'm a little stuck, like, I don't know how to be more authentic in sales? What would you say to me?
Oh, man. What I would say that first of all, your natural self is the best salesperson in the world. So write down all of the negative things that you think about sales.
Yeah.
And we'll start removing them.
Great. So I would say to you, let's remove the things that are in the way of you expressing yourself through a book or through videos or through any of those things, right? It's like, if we don't teach it seriously, that's like becomes almost like not an integrity question, that maybe that's too big, but it becomes a little bit of like, what you want to teach, you need to practice on you.
Yeah.
Right?
See,
Right.
and what I'm, and maybe here's where that not the disconnect. Here's where I stumble is I can do it really well, or I do it really well on the fly in coaching people.
Yes.
Haven't yet done is document it so I can create something that can attract more coaching clients.
Yes. What would happen if you recorded these conversations and then you start having content? I mean, I'm assuming that's what we're doing now a little bit. Like
Yeah,
that's
actually a great idea.
But like, what if you podcasted a conversation that's like a client, like a potential, like me, like, anyone, and you and I would have a conversation. This may not be for the podcast right now. I don't know what we're doing exactly here, but it could very much be like you ask 5 people that want to receive more knowledge about this topic, and you interview them exactly like we're doing, and you have a conversation where they tell you, like, I get a little, like, if you ask me to talk about my work, it's like super easy. But if you ask me to be like, okay, this is what I want to sell you, and da-di-da-di-da, it's like, I get a little nervous. Like, I'd be really curious to hear. So maybe we should set up another podcast where you work on me.
That's awesome.
Like, that'd be super fun.
I think that would be awesome.
That is where, because we serve each other as mirrors, like I can see things in what you're saying that you can't see for yourself. It's difficult. Like, I've worked with a lot of people that have reflected back to me things that are helpful for me to work on, because I'm willing. And that is my favorite word lately, to be willing to, like, because if you're not willing to look at, like, this conversation could be a little confrontational, right? I'm a little bit like, hey, you got to go live your life, right? I mean, it could be a little confrontational, but it's not like I don't care about what you think, but we have to release ourselves from this, like, prison of, what does he think about me? What is this podcast listener is going to think about? It's like, who cares? Like, I'm like what you're teaching, right? Like, if I'm authentic, this is authentic. This is what you get. Like, this kind of, whatever.
That's exactly what it is. And it's, it's also being okay with how the other person responds. Like, you're not being a jerk. It's like, hey, if how you show up authentically doesn't resonate with them, the best path is just being okay with it and allowing them, because the thing that I found is you find more authenticity through that process.
Yes. And if people don't want to hang with me because I'm too direct, it's like, great, what good information. It's like, thank you for telling me, because I don't think we should hang out. I am super direct. It's like, I'm not going to start, like, shrinking into a pretzel to make sure you're okay. Like, that would be, first of all, every time you talk to someone, you'd have to shrink in a different kind of pretzel. That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of pretzels.
And that is what you're teaching, right? Like, be your authentic sales conversation, and then you attract the right kind of people. I think I think that's a really good topic for a book or a podcast or something.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I allow the get things done. There's times where I look back on my day and say, man, I did a lot today, but what actually did I accomplish, or what did I do? And it's almost hamster wheelish.
Yeah. And I do think that this conversation we're having has to be at the heart of it, because it's like when you're a kid and you go to school, you don't kind of have a choice. You do, but you kind of don't, because your parents, whatever, you go to school and the teacher says, you need to do this for Thursday and you need to do that for Tuesday. And then you need to learn this thing that most often doesn't interest you at all, but there you are doing it. And then we throw these children into the world as young adults. And now we're like, well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. I've been told what to do all this time. I have no idea. So we have to go back. We have to go back to this time where we were told that what we need to do is what other people think. Like, we kind of need to reconstruct this machine, because otherwise, like, you rebel what you were told, which is not freedom, right? You're just doing the opposite of whatever they told you to do. Or you just don't know how to initiate your own stuff because you were never really free to do so for the most formative years of your life, right? Like how many kids do we know that are like, well, yes, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you want to be a fireman because that's all you know. But other than that, there's no genuine, deep, real conversations with the young people in a school environment where we really are truly asked, like, what interests you? What makes, so we all learn to function in a very dysfunctional way, I think, with this prison of not ever really, I mean, a prisoner doesn't ask, what do I do today? Right? Just like you get up, you go to the yard, whatever you're allowed to do, and then you come back and that's what you do, right? Well, kids are kind of like that. And we takes too long. It takes too long for those years for us to be able to come back. This is a really deep conversation we're having, Brian.
Yeah. I'm with you. I love it.
This is deeper than I was expecting. But this is really valuable because if we don't take it back in a real way, not like we were saying earlier, not from I'm never going to do what these people tell me to do and like be a rebel, because that's also not, you're still completely in the prison, right?
Yeah.
But to genuinely sit with ourselves and journal or talk to a computer, whatever it is, like you can talk to our phones now with all these tools we have, but really answer the question, like, what do I want? Like, what makes me happy? Where do I, like, I was just on a call with someone. I thought I was on the call for like 10 minutes. We were together for an hour and a half, but I was having like time, like people think time is a fixed thing. It's not. What you experience in that time is really what time is, right? Like we could be doing something like this conversation. We've been talking for like 30 minutes. I feel like it's been like 10 minutes because it's so interesting. Well, how do we do our lives so we have a series of those, a series of things that when we're doing it, we literally are like, wait, what just happened? Like it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right?
I love that because when I experience time like that, I feel rooted and grounded in my purpose.
Yeah. So maybe that's the exercise. Like okay, so let me ask you this. If we have another minute, what percentage of your time, and you don't have to say it out loud to all of us, but you can really do it with yourself. Like what percentage of your time would you say today, in your life, would you say represents this grounded time? Like how often do you think you are there?
So I'm going to throw in, I want to think through this. The coaching that I do, like with clients, because that actually shows some of that time. So I would say 35% of my time is with clients. I would say another 5% is without. So that's 60% of my time. I'm not,
it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's also nothing. Like when I worked with someone once who, when I asked him a question similar to that, he said 95% of his life he wasn't in his purpose. 95. I mean, I started crying. It was just like, you just killed me like that. And he's super bright, super intelligent guy. Well, so for you, what could be interesting, since we've identified 40%, let's say, what would it take to even go 1% today? Or even 5% this week, whatever it is, like decide a number that feels comfortable. But what would that look like to have one more? What would you have to delegate? What would you have to do differently? What risk would you have to take? Like I would journal on those things. Like I would take like an hour of my time, go sit somewhere where nobody needs my attention. I would do that. That's one of the things I recommend to my clients all the time is like, how do I sit with me? Because I need to know what that is. I need to know who that is, right?
Yeah.
We often haven't spent enough time and we like doing lives out of this place that's not anchored in who we actually are. There's something wrong with that. Something that's not right. We don't eat just any food. We eat food because we've tried food, we didn't like it. We've tried this food, we really liked it. We've tried this movie, we really liked it. So we like this kind of movie, right? But we don't do that for our most deepest purpose in life. Like where do I get completely turned on? And then try to like build your career and build your life so you do more and more of that and you make money of that. I think that's the gem. I think that's where the juice is.
I agree 100%. It's I'm beginning to learn that faster now as my business grows, as I grow, and it's living into that, right? The knowing and doing are two completely different things, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's not there though if you don't know, right? You have to know. So then when you know, my work, actually, funny enough, as we're probably wrapping up here, is in that gap. Like, how do you, once you know, What is the very next, like if we said to you, you're 60%, okay, great, 60%, you're not in your grounded space. Well, what do we do so that 60 becomes 55 and then 50?
Yeah.
And that becomes like manageable.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people scare themselves with like, I'm going to go climb this giant mountain. It's like, I don't know, let's go buy a pair of shoes. Let's go buy a pair of hiking shoes, right? And let's go for a small hike and then go for, like, we don't just start like climbing the tall mountain. And yet somehow with life, we expected to either do the tall mountain or nothing at all. And that's like, let's go buy hiking shoes. Let's go do a little something that moves it in the right direction.
I love that. I think that is phenomenal advice because what I've noticed is that the large numbers of people fail because they try to go to the top of the mountain once, right, and they don't get there for some reason. Rather,
they get burned out. They get like,
and there's times where I tell clients like, hey, like they're new into generating sales. I'm like, hey, Joe, let's just go have 2 conversations this week. Just 2, right? Not make $1 million.
Not 7 conversations an hour or whatever people do goals to. I agree with you.
It just doesn't make sense. I'm not saying do away with the big, hairy, audacious goal. I'm saying let's chunk that goal down into small parts. So I'd love your advice on this. So, well, listen, this has been, for me, awesome. I'm hoping that it's been.
It was awesome for me. Thank you. It was fun to follow. I love following. I don't have talking points. I'm bored with talking points.
Yeah,
no, that's a real conversation.
Well, and it was. I appreciate your transparency, your genuineness, and your authenticity because you are living what you preach.
What I preach, huh? Well, that's the best compliment you can give me. Thank you. It was super fun. You were incredibly transparent and honest and open as well, which makes these conversations, I think we all want them. So let's have them, right? Like we all want them, and then we keep like wondering why we're not having them. I think it just takes that, just like leap, right? Just ask something different and have the courage to show who you are. I loved it. Thank you. That was really a wonderful conversation.
Yeah. So how can everybody who's watching and listening get a hold of you? Where can they find you? Your website?
Website is easy, BeCurrentToday.com, BeCurrentToday.com. This notion of being current is one of my favorite ones. Like literally, like what is real, what is true right now? Like, let's go with that. So BeCurrentToday.com, and there's lots of articles, lots of things online about that. So
cool.
More to come.
Well, again, I appreciate your time, and thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of the OnPurpose Growth podcast. This is Brian McDonald, and go to Sophie's website, go check that out. I know I will, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.
Thank you.